The screams of dying men echoed across the field as Lieutenant Nathan McCoy advanced through the billowing gunpowder smoke. April 1865. The war was nearly over, everyone knew it. But still, the bullets kept flying. Still, men kept falling. His uniform was caked with mud and blood, none of it his own. 20 days of fighting had left him hollow-eyed and mechanical, his movements precise but devoid of thought. "Vance!" he shouted to what remained of his unit, adjusting his grip on his Springfield rifle. The weight had become an extension of his arm after 4 years of fighting. Through the haze, shadowy figures moved like specters. The Confederate line was breaking. Nathan raised his rifle, squinting down the barrel at a figure who emerged suddenly from the smoke. A clean shot. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Don't shoot! It's me!" The voice came a heartbeat too late. The rifle kicked against Nathan's shoulder, the sound lost in the cacophony of battle. When the smoke cleared for that brief, terrible moment, Nathan saw the face of the man he'd just shot. Robert, his younger brother. Nathan dropped his rifle, rushing forward as his brother crumpled to the ground. Blood bloomed across Robert's gray Confederate uniform like a terrible flower. "No, no, no." Nathan gathered his brother into his arms, pressed his hand against the wound. Blood seeped between his fingers. "Robert, hold on, you'll be all right." But looking into his brother's eyes, Nathan already knew the truth. Robert's gaze, so like his own, found Nathan's face. Recognition, pain, and something else. Acceptance, perhaps, flickered across his features. "Nathan," Robert whispered, blood bubbling at the corner of his lips. "The letter. Keep my promise." His voice grew fainter with each word. "She needs to know." "What promise, Robert? Stay with me." But Robert's eyes had already gone distant, staring at something beyond the smoke-filled battlefield. His final breath escaped in a sigh, and Nathan's world collapsed into darkness. The scream that tore from Nathan's throat wasn't human. Nathan McCoy bolted upright in bed, sweat-soaked and gasping for air. The nightmare again, always the same. For 20 years, his brother had died in his arms night after night. Pale moonlight filtered through the cabin's lone window, illuminating the sparse furnishings of his bedroom. The nightmare had come earlier tonight. Dawn was still hours away. Nathan reached with trembling fingers for the bottle of whiskey he kept by his bedside, took a long pull that burned all the way down. It never really helped, but he kept trying anyway. His cabin sat nestled against the foothills of the Wyoming mountains. Rose Creek, they called this territory. Far enough from civilization that most days he could almost forget who he was, what he'd done. Almost. Nathan swung his legs over the side of the bed, knowing sleep wouldn't return now. The floorboards creaked beneath his bare feet as he padded across the room to his dresser, opening the bottom drawer. From beneath a stack of neatly folded clothes, he withdrew a small wooden box, its surface worn smooth from years of handling. The lock clicked open easily. Inside, nestled on a faded scrap of blue cloth, torn from Robert's uniform, lay a yellowed letter and a silver pendant. He touched neither, simply stared at them as he did most nights after the dream woke him. The letter remained sealed. For 20 years, he hadn't had the courage to read his brother's final words. "Coward," he whispered to himself in the darkness. Through the window, the first hint of purple touched the eastern sky. Another sleepless night, another day on the ranch. Nathan closed the box, locked it, and returned it to its hiding place. By the time the sun rose, he would be miles from the cabin, checking fence lines and cattle, running from ghosts that always caught him anyway. The summer heat beat down mercilessly as Nathan rode the boundary of his property. His horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding named Scout, picked its way carefully along the rocky terrain. 6 hours in the saddle had left him dusty and parched, but the physical labor was a blessed distraction from the memories that haunted him. "Just need to check the north fence line and we're done," he told Scout, patting the horse's neck. The animal's ears flicked back at the sound of his voice, the only conversation Nathan typically had during his days. As they crested a small rise, Nathan noticed something unusual: fresh wagon tracks cutting across his land, heading toward the ravine. Frowning, he followed the trail. This was his property, and he didn't welcome trespassers. The tracks led down toward a dried creek bed. Scout snorted, sensing Nathan's tension. "Easy, boy," Nathan murmured, scanning the landscape. His hand drifted to the Colt revolver holstered at his hip, a habit from his military days he'd never managed to shake, though his fingers trembled slightly at the touch of the weapon. Something glinted in the dirt ahead, catching the afternoon sun. Nathan dismounted, approaching cautiously. Kneeling, he brushed away the dust to reveal a broken camera, an expensive one by the look of it. Beside it lay shards of glass from the shattered lens. "What the hell?" he muttered, turning the camera over in his hands. It wasn't the kind of thing one would find out here in the middle of nowhere. Then he heard it, a faint, pained moan carrying on the hot breeze. Nathan dropped the camera, drawing his revolver as he moved toward the sound. Around the bend in the dry creek bed, he stopped dead in his tracks. A young woman was staked to the ground, her wrists and ankles bound with rope, tied to the wooden stakes driven deep into the earth. Her dress, once fine by the look of the fabric, was torn and filthy. Her skin was sunburned and blistered where it had been exposed to the merciless sun. Dark hair, matted with dust and sweat, partially obscured her face. For a moment, Nathan stood frozen. This far from town, this far from anywhere. Who would do such a thing? The woman moaned again, her head rolling to one side. Nathan holstered his gun and rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside her. He felt for a pulse at her neck, weak but steady. Her skin burned with fever. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he asked, already pulling his knife to cut the ropes. When he lifted her head gently to give her water from his canteen, the dying sunlight fell across her face. For one disorienting moment, Nathan saw not the woman but Robert, his brother's face superimposed over hers in a trick of memory and guilt that left him momentarily paralyzed. He blinked hard, and the illusion vanished. But something about her, something in the curve of her cheek or the set of her jaw, had triggered the memory so strongly that his hands shook as he pressed the canteen to her cracked lips. "Don't," she whispered deliriously as water trickled into her mouth. "Don't take pictures. Father can't know." Her voice was barely audible. 5,000. The camera. Nathan frowned, cutting the last of the ropes. As he did, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. A faint scar across her left wrist, the kind that comes from a single determined cut. And on her right hand, something else caught his attention. A small slip of paper clutched tightly in her fist. Gently, he pried open her fingers. It was a torn piece of a letter, and through the dirt and sweat stains, Nathan could make out two words that sent a chill through him despite the heat. Rose Creek. "What are you doing out here?" he murmured, though she was beyond answering. Gathering her carefully in his arms, Nathan carried her to Scout. The horse danced nervously at the new burden, but settled under Nathan's calm commands. With one arm securely around the unconscious woman, Nathan took the reins and started the long ride back to his cabin. The setting sun cast long shadows across the plains as they rode, the woman occasionally murmuring incoherently against Nathan's chest. Once she said something that made his heart stutter. "The final promise," she whispered. "The soldier with the silver pendant." Nathan looked down sharply, but her eyes remained closed, her words nothing more than fever dreams. Yet a cold certainty settled in his gut. This woman's appearance was no coincidence. After 20 years of running, it seemed the past had finally caught up with him. By the time Nathan reached his cabin, darkness had fallen completely. The woman had grown quiet in his arms, her breathing shallow but steady. He carried her inside, laying her gently on his bed. In the lamplight, he could see her more clearly now. Despite the dirt and sunburn, she was beautiful, around 28, with delicate features that spoke of privilege and wealth. This was no frontier woman. Her hands, though blistered now, showed no calluses or signs of hard work. Nathan dampened a cloth and began carefully cleaning her face. She stirred slightly at his touch, but didn't wake. As he worked, he noticed a strange bruise at her temple. Someone had struck her, and recently. "What happened to you?" he murmured, though he suspected he already knew part of the answer. The broken camera in the ravine, her delirious words about pictures. Someone had been using her for something unsavory. The thought made his jaw clench. After cleaning her wounds and making her as comfortable as possible, Nathan searched her clothing for any identification. In a hidden pocket of her torn dress, he found what remained of a letter, the other half of the fragment she'd been clutching. Most of it was illegible, damaged by sweat and dirt, but the address was clear. Rose Creek, Wyoming territory. His territory. Nathan sat heavily in the chair beside the bed, watching the rise and fall of the woman's chest as she slept fitfully. Who was she? And why had she come here of all places? A soft knock at the door startled him. His hand went instinctively to his revolver as he crossed the room. Few people came to his cabin, especially after dark. "Who's there?" he called. "It's Sheriff Calloway, McCoy. Saw your lamp burning late. Everything all right?" Nathan relaxed slightly, opening the door. Sheriff Thomas Calloway stood on the porch, his weathered face creased with concern. At 65, Calloway was one of the oldest lawmen still working in the territory, and one of the few people Nathan respected. Sheriff wasn't expecting company. Calloway's sharp eyes took in Nathan's disheveled appearance. "Came by to warn you. There was a bank robbery over in Cheyenne 3 days back. Got word the bandits might be headed this way." His gaze shifted past Nathan to the bed. "What's this?" Nathan stepped aside, allowing the sheriff to see the unconscious woman. "Found her out by the North Ravine. Someone had her tied up, left to die in the sun." Calloway moved closer, studying the woman with a frown. "Well, I'll be damned." He turned to Nathan. "This matches the description of a missing woman from back east. Eleanor Harlow, adopted daughter of Senator Harrison Harlow from Boston. Telegram came through last week saying she'd disappeared." "Senator?" Nathan repeated, his stomach sinking. High society, then. Exactly what he'd suspected. And exactly the kind of complication he didn't need. Mm-hmm. Powerful man from what I hear. Been raising hell about finding his daughter. Calloway glanced back at the woman, Eleanor. "What was she doing out here?" Nathan hesitated, then held out the torn letter fragment. "Found this on her. Someone wanted her in Rose Creek, and someone else didn't want her to make it." Calloway studied the paper, his frown deepening. "I should take her back to town. Doc Jenkins can look after her, and I can send a telegram to her father." "She's not stable enough to move," Nathan said, perhaps too quickly. "High fever. Let her rest tonight, at least." The sheriff gave Nathan a long look, assessing. "This isn't like you, McCoy. Usually can't wait to get people off your land." Nathan said nothing, unable to explain the strange compulsion he felt to protect this woman. Not when he didn't understand it himself. After a moment, Calloway nodded. "All right, I trust your judgment. You were a medic in the war, after all." He moved toward the door. "I'll check back tomorrow. And McCoy," he paused, his hand on the door frame, "be careful. Don't know what kind of trouble followed this woman here, but it ain't the usual kind." After the sheriff left, Nathan returned to Eleanor's bedside. Her fever had risen and she tossed restlessly, murmuring words he couldn't catch. He placed a cool cloth on her forehead and settled into the chair beside her. "What brought you to Rose Creek, Eleanor Harlow?" he whispered. As if in answer, she turned toward his voice, her eyes fluttering open for the briefest moment. In her delirium, she whispered a name that sent ice through Nathan's veins. Robert. The next 3 days passed in a blur of fever and nightmares. Eleanor's and Nathan's both. Her condition worsened before it improved, the exposure and dehydration taking a severe toll. Nathan barely slept, keeping vigil and changing the cool cloths on her forehead. During her worst moments, she called out names. Margaret most frequently, but occasionally Robert as well. Each time the latter passed her lips, Nathan felt the wound of his brother's death tear open anew. It was late afternoon on the third day when Eleanor's fever finally broke. Nathan had dozed off in the chair beside her bed, his neck at an uncomfortable angle. He woke to find her watching him, her eyes clear for the first time. "You're not going to hurt me," she said. It wasn't a question, but a statement, as if she'd been studying him while he slept and come to a conclusion. Nathan straightened, rolling the stiffness from his shoulders. "No, ma'am, I'm not." Eleanor struggled to sit up, wincing as her sunburned skin pulled tight. Nathan moved to help her, propping pillows behind her back. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse from thirst. "My ranch, Rose Creek, Wyoming territory." He poured water from a pitcher by the bed. "Drink slowly." She took the cup with shaking hands, sipping cautiously. "You found me." "Yes, 3 days ago, out by the ravine." Nathan hesitated, then asked, "Do you remember what happened to you?" Eleanor's gaze dropped to the cup in her hands. "Some of it. I was traveling west by stagecoach. A man, He stopped the coach, said there was a problem with the road ahead. He was well-dressed, respectable looking. I didn't suspect. She trailed off, her fingers tightening around the cup. He must have put something in my water. I woke up tied to the ground. Did he tell you his name? Nathan asked quietly. She shook her head. He wore a black coat, had a camera. A shudder passed through her. He kept saying he needed the pictures, that they were worth thousands. I don't remember much else. Nathan nodded, not pressing further. Sheriff Calloway recognized your description. You're Senator Harlow's daughter? Something flickered across Eleanor's face, a wariness that hadn't been there before. Adopted daughter, yes. Is the sheriff sending word to my father? He wanted to. I suggested waiting until you were stronger. Thank you. The relief in her voice was palpable. I'm not ready to face him yet. Nathan studied her, noting the tension in her shoulders at the mention of her father. The sheriff will be back soon. He'll have questions. Eleanor set down her cup, meeting his gaze directly. And you? Don't you have questions, Mr. McCoy? Nathan McCoy. He saw no recognition in her eyes at the name, which both relieved and confused him. And yes, I do, starting with why you were carrying a letter addressed to Rose Creek. Her eyes widened slightly. You found the letter? What was left of it? Nathan retrieved the fragments from the table and handed them to her. Most of it's destroyed, but it seems you were looking for something, or someone, here. Eleanor stared at the tattered paper, her expression complicated. Not something, someone. She looked up at him, vulnerability and determination mingling in her gaze. I came to fulfill a promise, my adoptive mother's final wish. Your mother? Margaret Harlow. She died 3 months ago. Eleanor's voice softened with grief. Before she passed, she gave me a letter and told me I needed to find a soldier, a man named McCoy in Rose Creek. The room seemed to tilt beneath Nathan. What? She was a nurse during the war, Eleanor continued, unaware of the shock rippling through him. She said this man had made her a promise, and she'd made a promise in return. She couldn't fulfill it herself, so she asked me to do it for her. She looked at Nathan with renewed interest. McCoy, that's your name? Is it common around here? Nathan's mouth had gone dry. No, just me. Then you're the one I'm looking for. Eleanor leaned forward, wincing at the movement. Did you know my mother during the war? Nathan stood abruptly, turning away to hide the turmoil in his expression. I knew many nurses during the war, ma'am. I was a medic. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth she sought either. You should rest. We can talk more later. He could feel her eyes on his back, curious and disappointed. Of course, she said finally. Thank you for saving my life, Miss McCoy. Nathan nodded without turning, then quickly left the cabin. Outside, he leaned against the porch railing, drawing deep breaths of the cool evening air. Margaret, he remembered her now, the quiet, kind-eyed nurse who had been there that final day, who had helped him bury his brother in a hasty grave, who had promised to deliver Robert's letter and pendant to someone back east. And now her daughter was here, carrying the echo of a promise 20 years old. Nathan lifted his eyes to the darkening sky. The past wasn't just catching up with him. It was sitting in his bed, waiting for answers he'd spent 2 decades avoiding. The days that followed settled into an uneasy rhythm. Eleanor regained her strength slowly but steadily, while Nathan found increasingly transparent excuses to avoid lengthy conversations with her. He spent long days working the ranch, returning only to prepare meals and check on her recovery before retreating to sleep in the barn. Sheriff Calloway visited twice, asking Eleanor detailed questions about her abduction. Her description of her captor, tall, well-dressed, with a distinctive scar along his jawline, didn't match anyone known to the sheriff. But the man's interest in valuable photographs suggested a blackmail scheme, likely targeting her father's political aspirations. I've sent a telegram to Boston, Calloway informed them during his second visit, letting the senator know his daughter's been found safe. Nathan noticed how Eleanor's shoulders tensed at this news, but said nothing. Thank you, Sheriff, she said politely, though I would have preferred to contact my father myself. Well, it's done now, miss. Expect he'll be sending someone to fetch you soon. After the sheriff departed, Eleanor stood at the cabin window for a long time, watching the horizon as if expecting riders to appear at any moment. You don't want to go back, Nathan observed, breaking his usual reticence. Eleanor turned to him, her expression guarded. It's complicated. Most things are. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. My father is controlling. He has specific ideas about my future, none of which include gallivanting across the country on my own. Yet here you are. Yes, here I am. She studied him with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see more than Nathan wanted to reveal. Though I'm still not sure why you're here, Mr. McCoy. Rose Creek is a long way from anywhere. Nathan busied himself with the coffee pot. I like the quiet. And the isolation, she pressed. Most men seek fortune or adventure in the West. You seem to be hiding from both. His hands stilled momentarily. Maybe I'm hiding from something else. The war. Nathan looked up sharply. Eleanor's expression was gentle, understanding. I've seen that look before, she explained. In my father's eyes sometimes. In the eyes of men who came to our house for political meetings. The war never really ended for some. Nathan turned away, uncomfortable with her perception. You're feeling better, strong enough to learn how to survive out here in case your father's men are delayed. The abrupt change of subject wasn't subtle, but Eleanor accepted it gracefully. I'd like that. The following days took on a new pattern. Each morning, Nathan taught Eleanor the basics of frontier life, how to build a fire, identify edible plants, saddle, and ride a horse. She proved a quick study, approaching each lesson with determination and intelligence that impressed him despite himself. You're a natural rider, he commented one afternoon as they returned from a short trail ride. Most Eastern ladies I've known prefer carriages. Eleanor laughed, the sound bright in the summer air. I've always preferred horses to carriages, much to my father's dismay. She patted her mount's neck affectionately. There's something about the freedom of it. Nathan found himself smiling, a rare occurrence that felt strange on his face. Freedom's worth pursuing. Is that why you came west? For freedom? His smile faded. Something like that. Eleanor studied him with that too perceptive gaze. You're very good at avoiding questions, Mr. McCoy. And you're very good at asking them, Miss Harlow. That evening, after a simple dinner of venison stew, Eleanor insisted on cleaning the dishes despite Nathan's protests. As she worked, she spoke of her life in Boston, of the elegant parties and political maneuverings, of her father's ambitions and her adoptive mother's quiet strength. Margaret was the heart of our household, she said, her voice soft with memory. She took me in when I was 8 in 1865, just as the war was ending. My parents died in a fire during those chaotic final months. I'm sorry, Nathan said, meaning it. Eleanor nodded her acknowledgement. She taught me to read, to think for myself. My father wanted a pretty ornament for his political career, but Margaret raised me to be more. Her hands stilled in the dishwater. When she got sick, everything changed. She became obsessed with fulfilling this promise she'd made during the war. She gave me this letter, made me swear I'd deliver it. Nathan's heart quickened. The letter that was destroyed? No, that was my travel instructions. The real letter is still intact, in my travel trunk that was stolen during the abduction. Eleanor dried her hands, turning to face him. It's sealed. I don't know what's inside. Only that it was important enough for her to make it her dying wish. Nathan looked away, unable to meet her eyes. The weight of his brother's sealed letter, still hidden in his dresser drawer, pressed on his conscience. Mr. McCoy, Eleanor said quietly, did you know my mother during the war? The truth, please. The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken things. Nathan opened his mouth to answer when a sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Both turned toward the sound, tension immediately filling the room. It was well past the hour for social calls, and Nathan wasn't the type to receive visitors even in daylight. Stay here, he murmured, retrieving his revolver from its holster hanging by the door. When he opened the door, Nathan found himself facing a well-dressed stranger, tall and lean, with sharp features partially shadowed by an expensive wide-brimmed hat. A black coat, finely tailored, hung from his shoulders despite the summer heat. Good evening, the man said, his cultured voice carrying a hint of an Eastern accent. I apologize for the late hour. My name is Adrian Thorne. I'm looking for Miss Eleanor Harlow. Nathan kept the door partially closed, his body blocking any view of the cabin's interior, his finger tense near the trigger of his revolver. "There's no one by that name here." Thorne smiled thinly. "I believe there is, Mr. McCoy. Senator Harlow hired me to locate his daughter. The sheriff in town was kind enough to direct me to your establishment." His eyes swept dismissively over the modest cabin. Nathan didn't miss how Thorne's gaze lingered briefly on his dresser, exactly where the wooden box containing Robert's letter and pendant was stored. A cold realization struck him. This man hadn't come by chance. Something in Thorne's calculating eyes suggested he knew far more than a simple investigator should, as if he'd been searching for something, or someone, connected to Nathan for a very long time. Behind Nathan, a floorboard creaked. He knew without looking that Eleanor had moved closer to the door. "It's all right, Mr. McCoy," she said quietly. "I'll speak with him." Nathan hesitated, then stepped aside reluctantly, keeping his revolver visible. Eleanor appeared beside him, her posture straight and dignified despite her simple borrowed clothes. "Mr. Thorne, my father sent you?" "Indeed, Miss Harlow. He's quite concerned about your welfare." Thorne's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've been instructed to escort you back to Boston immediately." "I'm not ready to return yet," Eleanor replied firmly. "Please inform my father that I'm safe and will contact him when my business here is concluded." Thorne's expression hardened. "I'm afraid the senator was most insistent. He's worried about your state of mind following your mother's passing." Nathan watched Eleanor's jaw tighten at the implication. "My state of mind is perfectly sound, Mr. Thorne, and my father has no right to question it." Thorne's gaze shifted to Nathan. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately, Miss Harlow. I'm sure Mr. McCoy has other matters to attend to." "Anything you have to say to Miss Harlow can be said in front of me," Nathan responded coldly. Something flashed in Thorne's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. "Very well." He turned back to Eleanor. "Your father is concerned about the nature of your quest. He believes Margaret's illness affected her judgment and that she sent you on a fool's errand." Eleanor's chin lifted defiantly. "My mother knew exactly what she was doing, and I intend to honor her wishes, even if it means associating with a man like McCoy." Thorne's voice dropped lower. "Do you know who your host really is, Miss Harlow? Did he tell you about Appomattox?" Nathan felt as though he'd been struck. Few people knew of his involvement in that final battle. Fewer still knew what had happened there. "That's enough," he growled, raising his revolver slightly. Thorne smiled, the expression chilling. "I thought not." He turned back to Eleanor. "Your father will arrive within the week to collect you himself. I suggest you reconsider your position before then." With a slight bow, he stepped back. "Good evening to you both." As Thorne walked away into the darkness, Nathan closed the door, his mind racing. The man knew too much about Appomattox, about Nathan's past. This was no ordinary investigator. "Mr. McCoy?" Eleanor's voice pulled him back to the present. She stood watching him, concern and curiosity mingling in her expression. What did he mean about Appomattox? Nathan holstered his revolver with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "Nothing important." "It seemed important." She stepped closer. "And he seemed to know you." "I've never met him before." That much at least was true. "But he knows something about you." Eleanor's gaze was unwavering. "Something to do with the war." Before Nathan could respond, a memory surfaced, sharp and clear as glass. The final days at Appomattox Courthouse. The confusion of battle. A fellow Union soldier standing nearby when Nathan discovered his brother among the Confederate wounded. A soldier who had witnessed Nathan's grief and heard Robert's final words. A soldier named Thorne. "Mr. McCoy," Eleanor prompted. Nathan blinked, pushing the memory away. "It's late. You should rest." He moved toward the door. "I'll sleep in the barn tonight." Nathan. It was the first time she'd used his given name, and it stopped him in his tracks. Whatever he knows, whatever he's holding over you, you don't have to face it alone. The kindness in her voice nearly undid him. 20 years of solitude had not prepared Nathan for compassion. "Some things," he said quietly, "are better faced alone." He closed the door behind him, walking into the cool night air. Behind him, the cabin's lamplight spilled golden across the yard. Before him stretched darkness and the vast, star-scattered sky. Nathan looked up at those distant points of light and wondered how much time he had left before the truth caught up with him completely. For Eleanor learned that the man she sought, the man who'd made a promise to her mother, was the same man who'd killed his own brother. The same brother who somehow had been connected to Margaret Harlow. Sleep would not come easily tonight. Nathan woke to screams. He bolted upright in the barn loft, disoriented for a moment before recognizing Eleanor's voice coming from the cabin. Grabbing his revolver, he raced across the yard, his heart pounding in his chest. He burst through the door to find Eleanor sitting up in bed, her face ashen in the moonlight streaming through the window. No intruder, no immediate danger, only the lingering echo of her nightmare. "Eleanor?" He approached cautiously, setting his gun aside. She looked at him, but her eyes seemed to see something else. "He was taking pictures," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "saying they would destroy my father, that no one would want damaged goods." Nathan sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "It was just a dream. You're safe now." She shook her head, drawing her knees up to her chest. Was a dream, a memory. Her fingers absently traced the scar on her wrist. "When they found me, after I tried to end things, Father had it all hushed up, said it would ruin his career if people knew his daughter had attempted such a sin." Nathan remained silent, sensing she needed to speak the words that had been bottled inside her. "I loved someone once," Eleanor continued, her voice steadying. "His name was William. Father didn't approve, said he was beneath our station. When William died in a carriage accident, I couldn't see the point anymore." Her fingers pressed harder against the scar. "Margaret saved me. She found me in time, convinced Father I needed care, not shame." "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Nathan said softly. Eleanor's gaze focused on him at last, tears shimmering in her eyes. "She was, and her final wish means everything to me." She took a deep breath. "Mr. McCoy, Nathan, I know you're hiding something about your connection to my mother. I can see it in your face whenever I mention her name or Robert's." Nathan stiffened. "Robert?" She called his name often near the end. "I thought perhaps he was someone she knew during the war." Eleanor studied him intently. "The way you reacted just now, you knew him too, didn't you?" The moment stretched between them, taut and fragile. Nathan stood, moving to the window to hide his expression. Outside, the first hint of dawn lightened the eastern sky. "Yes," he said finally, his voice rough. "I knew Robert." Eleanor slipped out of bed, coming to stand beside him. "Who was he to her? To you?" Nathan closed his eyes briefly. 20 years of silence pressed down on him, the weight of secrets nearly unbearable. But Eleanor deserves some truth at least. "Robert was my brother," he said quietly. "He died at Appomattox in the final days of the war." Eleanor's sharp intake of breath was the only sound in the still cabin. "Your brother? But Margaret never mentioned you, only him. We fought on opposite sides. Robert joined the Confederacy after a falling out with our father." Nathan's hands clenched on the windowsill. "I was with the Union. We hadn't spoken in 4 years when we met on that battlefield." "What happened to him?" Nathan couldn't bring himself to say the words. Instead, he said, "He died in my arms." His last words were about a promise, a letter I was supposed to deliver. He turned to face her. "I think your mother was there. She was a nurse who helped me bury him." Eleanor's eyes widened with understanding. "And the letter she gave me, it's connected to Robert somehow." "I believe so." Nathan hesitated, then added, "I have something of his too, a letter he wrote before that final battle, and a silver pendant." "A silver pendant," Eleanor repeated, her voice hushed. She mentioned it. "The soldier with the silver pendant. That was Robert?" Nathan nodded. "He always wore it. I kept it after he died." Eleanor searched his face, putting together pieces of a puzzle she'd only glimpsed before. "So when I came looking for McCoy in Rose Creek—" "You were looking for the wrong brother," Nathan finished. The weight of this revelation hung between them, reshaping everything. Eleanor moved back to sit on the edge of the bed, processing. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked finally. "Because I've spent 20 years trying to forget," Nathan answered honestly. "And because I don't know what promise Robert made to your mother, or why it mattered enough for her to send you across the country to fulfill it." Before Eleanor could respond, a gunshot shattered the pre-dawn stillness. Both of them froze, then Nathan grabbed his revolver, moving instantly to the window. "Stay down," he ordered, peering cautiously through the glass. In the gray half-light, he could make out a figure standing at the edge of the property. The distinctive silhouette of Adrian Thorne, holding a smoking pistol pointed skyward. A warning shot. "McCoy!" Thorne's voice carried clearly through the morning air. "I know you're in there. We have unfinished business." Nathan's mind raced. Thorne shouldn't have returned so soon and not alone, if he was truly working for Senator Harlow. "That's not right," Eleanor whispered, seeming to read his thoughts. "My father would never send someone to threaten us." "No," Nathan agreed grimly. "I don't think your father sent him at all." As if confirming his suspicion, Thorne called out again. "Bring out the girl and the pictures, McCoy. $5,000, just as we agreed." Eleanor gasped. "The pictures? He's the one who abducted me. He's been following me all along." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me." "What are you going to do?" He checked his revolver, feeling the familiar tremor in his fingers. "End this." Eleanor caught his arm. "Your hand is shaking." "It always does," Nathan admitted. "Since Appomattox, since Robert." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You haven't fired at a person since then, have you?" Nathan couldn't meet her gaze. "I swore I never would again." Eleanor's grip on his arm tightened. "Then we face him together." When he started to protest, she added, "You taught me to shoot, remember? I'm a quick study." Despite the danger, a reluctant smile tugged at Nathan's mouth. "So you are." He retrieved a second revolver from a locked cabinet, checking it before handing it to Eleanor. "Stay behind me. If anything happens—" "Nothing will happen," she interrupted firmly. "We're going to survive this, Nathan McCoy. Both of us." The certainty in her voice steadied him in a way he couldn't explain. With a nod, he moved to the door, Eleanor following close behind. Outside, Thorne stood waiting, his black coat flapping in the morning breeze. When he saw them emerge, a cold smile spread across his face. "There she is," he said, his eyes fixed on Eleanor. "The senator's precious daughter. Do you know how much your father would pay to keep those photographs from becoming public, Miss Harlow?" "A fortune." "There are no photographs," Eleanor responded, her voice steady despite the revolver in Thorne's hand. "You destroyed the camera when you fled." Thorne laughed. "Do you think I'm an amateur? That was merely equipment I was willing to sacrifice. The glass plates, the real treasures, are safely stored." His gaze shifted to Nathan. "You should have minded your own business, Lieutenant McCoy." Nathan stiffened at the use of his military rank. "How do you know who I am?" "I make it my business to know everything about everyone." Thorne's smile turned predatory. "I was there, you know, at Appomattox, serving as an aide to General Grant's staff, documenting surrender terms." His eyes gleamed with a dark satisfaction. "I saw you that day, Lieutenant Nathan McCoy, the sharpshooter with the perfect record. I watched you walk through the fog of battle and emerge carrying a Confederate soldier. I saw your face when you realized it was your own brother." Thorne's voice dropped lower. "After the war, when I began working for Senator Harlow and heard the name Margaret Beaumont, who'd become Margaret Harlow, I started connecting pieces. It took years of patient research, tracking down hospital records, speaking to former soldiers. When I finally understood what I'd witnessed that day and what it might be worth, well, patience has always been my virtue." The words hit Nathan like physical blows. Eleanor's quick intake of breath beside him confirmed she'd heard as well. "It was war," Nathan managed, his throat tight. "I couldn't see through the smoke." "Convenient excuse," Thorne sneered. "I wonder if Robert would have accepted it." Nathan's hand tightened on his revolver, trembling worse than ever. "Stop it," Eleanor commanded, stepping forward despite Nathan's attempt to keep her behind him. "Whatever happened during the war has nothing to do with your crimes now." Thorne's attention returned to her. "On the contrary, my dear, it has everything to do with why I'm here. You see, your mother made a terrible mistake. She entrusted Robert's letter to the wrong man, a man who killed his own brother." "Shut up," Nathan growled. "Did you know," Thorne continued, addressing Eleanor, but watching Nathan's reaction, "that Robert was in love? That the letter Lieutenant McCoy was supposed to deliver was to Robert's sweetheart? A nurse named Margaret. Eleanor paled. My mother? The very same. Your beloved adopted mother was in love with Robert McCoy, and this man, he pointed accusingly at Nathan, not only killed Robert but kept that truth from Margaret for 20 years. He never delivered the letter, never told her what happened to the man she loved. Enough, Nathan shouted, raising his revolver despite his shaking hand. Thorne merely smiled. Your aim was better at Appomattox, Lieutenant. The standoff stretched, tension crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. Nathan's revolver wavered in his unsteady grip, and Thorne's smile widened, sensing victory. You know what I find most interesting? Thorne mused. Margaret Harlow never gave up hope. For 20 years, she believed Robert might still be alive somewhere. That's why she sent you on this quest, Miss Harlow, not to fulfill a promise, but to find a ghost. Eleanor's voice shook with barely contained emotion. You're lying. Am I? Ask your protector here why he never delivered that letter. Why he let a woman spend 2 decades hoping when he knew the truth all along. Nathan's world narrowed to Thorne's mocking face and the weight of the revolver in his trembling hand. 20 years of guilt and self-hatred crystallized in this moment, facing a man who'd witnessed his greatest shame and now used it against him. You're right, Nathan said quietly. I never delivered the letter. I never told Margaret what happened to Robert. I've carried that failure every day since Appomattox. He steadied his grip through sheer force of will, but I won't fail again. Before Thorne could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. That's quite enough, gentlemen. All three turned to see Sheriff Calloway approaching on horseback, his rifle trained steadily on Thorne. Sheriff, Thorne greeted smoothly, though his smile had vanished, this is a private matter. Threatening folks at gunpoint stopped being private the moment I heard that warning shot, Calloway replied. Lower your weapon, mister. For a moment, it seemed Thorne might refuse. Then, with deliberate slowness, he lowered his revolver. Now toss it aside, Calloway instructed. Thorne complied, the gun landing in the dirt several feet away. Miss Harlow, the sheriff continued, I believe this man matches the description of your abductor? Eleanor nodded firmly. Yes, Sheriff, it's him. Then Adrian Thorne, you're under arrest for kidnapping, attempted extortion, and making threats against these good people. Calloway dismounted, keeping his rifle trained on Thorne. McCoy, if you wouldn't mind retrieving his weapon. Nathan moved forward cautiously, picking up Thorne's discarded revolver. Thorne's eyes remained fixed on Eleanor. This isn't over, Miss Harlow. When your father arrives, he'll learn everything about your mother's secrets, about McCoy's true nature. I look forward to it, Eleanor replied coldly. I'm sure he'll be fascinated to hear how you abducted and threatened his daughter. As Calloway secured Thorne's hands behind his back, the sheriff gave Nathan a searching look. Seems there's more to this story than a simple kidnapping. Nathan nodded grimly. Much more, Sheriff, and I suspect it's only beginning. The sun crested the horizon as Calloway led Thorne away, casting long shadows across the yard. Nathan and Eleanor stood side by side, watching until they disappeared from view. You killed your brother, Eleanor said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. That's what he meant about Appomattox. Nathan couldn't look at her. Yes. By accident, in the confusion of battle? Does it matter? His voice was rough with self-loathing. He died by my hand. Eleanor turned to face him fully. It matters. The truth always matters. Nathan. The weight of her gaze forced him to meet her eyes at last. What he saw there wasn't the condemnation he expected, but something far more difficult to bear. Understanding. Come inside, she said softly. I think it's time we both read those letters. As they walked back to the cabin, the morning light strengthened around them, burning away the shadows of night. But the shadows of the past, Nathan knew, would not disperse so easily. 20 years of secrets were about to come to light. And somewhere back east, Senator Harrison Harlow was on his way to Rose Creek, bringing with him a reckoning none of them could escape. The letters lay on the rough-hewn table between them, 2 yellowed envelopes bearing the weight of 20 years. Eleanor's fingers hovered over one, Nathan's over the other. The morning light filtering through the cabin's single window cast long shadows across their faces. Together? Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan nodded, his expression grave. Together. With trembling fingers, they each broke the seal of an envelope. The paper crackled, brittle with age. Nathan unfolded his brother's final letter, the handwriting so familiar it made his chest ache. Eleanor did the same with Margaret's sealed message. The cabin fell silent as they read, save for their breathing and the occasional creak of the old wooden chair beneath Nathan's weight. "My dearest Nathan," Robert's letter began, "if you're reading this, then what we've both feared has come to pass. I won't waste these final words on politics or the divide that tore our nation and our family apart. Some rifts can never be mended, but brotherhood transcends even the deepest divides. I must entrust you with my heart's greatest secret and most important promise. During my time in Virginia, I met a nurse named Margaret. In the midst of all this death, we found something beautiful. We fell in love, Nathan. A love I never thought possible in times like these. If I don't survive, please find her. Tell her what happened to me, and give her the enclosed pendant. It was our promise to each other that when this war ended, we would begin a life together. She works at the field hospital near Richmond. Her full name is Margaret Alden. I know I have no right to ask anything of you after I chose a different path, but I ask this not as a soldier of the Confederacy to a Union lieutenant, but as a brother to a brother. Please, Nathan, give her the chance to mourn, to know, to move forward. Whatever happens, know that I never stopped loving you, brother. The war divided our uniforms, but never our blood. Your brother always." Robert Nathan lowered the letter to the table. His vision blurred with tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed in 20 years. He looked up to find Eleanor watching him, her own eyes glistening as she held Margaret's letter in unsteady hands. "What does it say?" he asked hoarsely. Eleanor unfolded the yellowed pages, her hands steadier now. Taking a deep breath, she began to share the contents with Nathan. "Margaret begins by addressing me as her daughter in every way that matters," Eleanor explained, her eyes scanning the first lines. "She reveals she'd kept a secret for 20 years, a love affair during the war." Eleanor's voice grew softer as she continued summarizing. She describes meeting Robert McCoy while serving as a nurse in Virginia. They fell deeply in love despite being on opposite sides of the conflict. Her fingers traced the delicate script. The pendant. She explains it was Robert's promise to her of their future together after the war ended. Looking up at Nathan, her eyes shimmering, Eleanor added, "She writes that after Robert disappeared in the final days of fighting, a Union lieutenant named Nathan, was supposed to bring news of Robert's fate. But when you never returned, she spent years wondering if he might still be alive somewhere, injured or unable to remember who he was. I married your father not out of love, but necessity. He offered me position, security, and you, the greatest gift of my life. Harrison is not an evil man, but he has never known about Robert. It would destroy the life we've built. My final wish is that you find Nathan McCoy in Rose Creek, Wyoming. If anyone knows what truly happened to Robert, it is him. Perhaps Robert himself is there. The not knowing has been my life's greatest burden. Please, Eleanor, discover the truth I could not. Whatever you learn, know that my love for you has been the purest joy of my existence. You are the daughter of my heart, if not my body. All my love, Margaret." Eleanor folded the letter carefully, her hands steadier now. "She never knew," she said softly. "All those years." Nathan's face was ashen. "I failed them both." He reached for the wooden box on the table, opening it to reveal the silver pendant, a simple disc with an etched rose hanging from a tarnished chain. "I should have delivered this. I should have told her." "Why didn't you?" Eleanor asked, her voice holding no accusation, only genuine curiosity. Nathan stared at the pendant, lost in memories. "After Robert died, after I killed him, I couldn't face anyone. I told myself I'd find her when I was stronger. Then weeks became months, and months became years." His voice cracked. "By the time I learned she had married a senator, I convinced myself she was better off not knowing." Eleanor reached across the table, her fingers brushing against the pendant. "She never stopped loving him. And I robbed her of closure, of the chance to properly grieve." Nathan closed his eyes, the weight of his guilt crushing him anew. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I failed your mother. I failed my brother." "Yes," Eleanor said simply. "You did." Nathan looked up, surprised by her honesty. "But now we have a chance to make it right," she continued, "to honor both their memories. A heavy silence filled the cabin as the full implication of their shared history settled around them. Two strangers connected by love and loss across decades, brought together by fate, or perhaps something more deliberate. Thorn, Nathan said suddenly. He knows all this. How? Eleanor frowned. He must have been following me since Boston. Perhaps he intercepted my correspondence with the stagecoach company, learned where I was headed. Well, that explains how he found you, but not how he knows about Robert, about Appomattox. Nathan shook his head. He was there that day. He saw what happened. Then he's been planning this for a very long time, Eleanor said, her expression darkening. The question is why? Simple blackmail doesn't explain such patience. Nathan rose from the table, moving to the window. Outside, the morning had brightened into full day, the ranch quiet and peaceful, deceptively so. The sheriff should be back with news of Thorn soon. Until then, we should prepare for your father's arrival. Eleanor joined him at the window. He won't come alone. Harrison Harlow never travels without an entourage. How much does he know about your mother's past? About Robert? Nothing if mother's letter is to be believed. Eleanor sighed. My father is a complicated man, Nathan. He's ambitious, controlling, but not without compassion. His love, however, comes with conditions. Nathan turned to face her. And what will you tell him when he arrives about this? He gestured to the letters, to the pendant, to the impossible tangle of their shared history. Eleanor's gaze was steady, determined in a way that reminded Nathan of the quiet strength he'd seen in soldiers facing impossible odds. The truth, all of it. He deserves to know who Margaret really was, who I really am. Nathan nodded slowly. Then we face him together. The declaration hung between them, a promise neither had expected to make to the other when the day began. In the space of a morning, they had become unlikely allies, bound by secrets finally brought to light. Eleanor smiled faintly. Together. Sheriff Calloway arrived shortly after midday, his expression grim as he dismounted in front of the cabin. Nathan and Eleanor met him on the porch, both tensing at the look on his weathered face. What is it, Sheriff? Nathan asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. Thorn's gone, Calloway said without preamble. Broke out of the jail cell sometime before dawn. Deputy Jenkins found him missing during the morning rounds. Eleanor's hand flew to her throat. How? Had help, looks like. Someone slipped him a key, or he had one hidden. The sheriff removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow. Found this carved into the cell wall. He handed Nathan a folded paper containing a charcoal rubbing of words scratched into wood. S.H. pays more. S.H., Eleanor read over Nathan's shoulder. Silas Harlow, my father. Calloway's eyebrows rose. You think your daddy busted him out? No, she said firmly, but Thorn wants us to think that. He's playing a game, turning us against each other. Nathan studied the rubbing. This doesn't make sense. If Thorn is working for the senator, why would he abduct Eleanor in the first place? Why the elaborate blackmail scheme? Maybe he ain't working for who he says he is, Calloway suggested. Seems to me there's more to this story than any of us know. Nathan exchanged a glance with Eleanor. More than you can imagine, Sheriff. Well, I've got men searching, but Thorn's got at least a 6-hour head start. Could be anywhere by now. Calloway replaced his hat. Thought you should know. Keep your eyes open and your guns loaded. Man like that doesn't strike me as the type to let things go. After the sheriff departed, Nathan checked his rifle and revolvers, ensuring each was clean and loaded. Eleanor watched him from the doorway. You still can't shoot straight, can you? She asked quietly. Not at a person. Nathan's hand stilled on the rifle barrel. Haven't tried since Appomattox. But you will if Thorn comes back. It wasn't a question, but Nathan answered anyway. I'll do what needs doing. Eleanor approached, sitting beside him on the bench. Nathan, I've been thinking about something Thorn said, that Margaret sent me to find a ghost. She hesitated. Do you think she really believed Robert might still be alive all these years? Nathan considered this. Hope can be a powerful delusion when paired with grief, especially without proof. A body, Eleanor murmured. She never saw his body. We buried him in an unmarked grave near Appomattox. There wasn't time for proper services, not with the surrender negotiations happening. Nathan set the rifle aside. I should have taken her there. Should have given her that, at least. Eleanor's hand covered his, warm and steady. You can't change the past, Nathan, but we can honor their memory now. The touch of her hand on his sent an unexpected warmth through Nathan's chest, comfort from a source he'd denied himself for 20 years. Human connection, understanding, the possibility of forgiveness he hadn't dared hope for. The moment was broken by the distant sound of hoofbeats, multiple riders approaching from the east. Nathan stood quickly, reaching for his rifle. "Stay inside," he instructed, moving to the window. Eleanor joined him instead, peering through the glass. "It's too early for my father." Through the dust kicked up by the approaching horses, Nathan could make out 4 riders. Not a senator's entourage, but not simple travelers either. Their purposeful approach and formation spoke of men with a mission. "Thorn," Nathan muttered, recognizing the lead rider's distinctive black coat. "How did he gather men so quickly?" Eleanor asked, her voice tight with tension. "Those aren't new recruits," Nathan replied grimly. "Look at how they ride together. They know each other well. Thorn brought them with him from the east." Eleanor's eyes widened with realization. He planned this all along. The abduction, the camera, everything. It was a trap, but for whom? Me or you? "Both of us, I'd wager." Nathan checked his revolver one final time. "Eleanor, listen carefully. There's a cellar trap door beneath the rug in the kitchen. If things go badly, get down there and stay hidden." "I won't leave you to face them alone," she protested. Nathan turned to her, his expression softer than she'd yet seen it. "I've spent 20 years alone with my ghosts, Eleanor. I'm not afraid to die facing them." He pressed his spare revolver into her hand, "But I'd rather neither of us had to. Take this, just in case." Outside, the riders slowed to a walk, spreading out to approach the cabin from multiple angles. Thorn remained in the center, his posture relaxed, confident. "Nathan McCoy," he's called, his voice carrying easily across the yard. "I believe we have unfinished business." Nathan stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually across his body, not quite aimed, but ready. "You're trespassing, Thorn. Again." Thorn smiled, the expression not reaching his cold eyes. "Actually, I believe I'm on legitimate business. You see, I've spoken with Senator Harlow. He's most eager to recover his daughter and most generous to those who assist in the effort." Eleanor appeared in the doorway behind Nathan. "My father would never employ men like you." "Oh, but he has, Miss Harlow, for years." Thorn's smile widened. "Who do you think has kept his political opponents in check? Silence those who might speak about his past indiscretions? The senator's hands remain clean precisely because men like me exist." "You're lying," Eleanor said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. "Am I? Ask McCoy here about the nature of powerful men, about the shadows that follow them." Thorn dismounted smoothly, handing his reins to one of his companions. "Your father arrives tomorrow, Eleanor. He sent me ahead to prepare you." "Prepare her for what?" Nathan demanded, his finger tensing near the trigger despite his trembling hand. "For the truth, Lieutenant. The full truth, not just the convenient parts you two uncovered this morning." Thorn took a step forward. "Did you really think a simple love affair between a Confederate soldier and a Union nurse was all there was to this story?" Eleanor and Nathan exchanged confused glances. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor asked. "Your mother's maiden name wasn't Alden, was it?" Thorn said, his voice taking on a theatrical quality. "It was Beaumont, Margaret Beaumont, daughter of Colonel James Beaumont of the Confederate Army, one of the South's most valued military strategists and one of its wealthiest plantation owners." Eleanor shook her head in disbelief. "That's not possible. My mother was from Massachusetts." "After the war, yes, with a new name, a new history, a new life carefully constructed to hide her Southern roots." Thorn's eyes gleamed with malicious delight. "Robert McCoy didn't just fall in love with a nurse. He fell in love with the daughter of one of the Confederacy's elite. And when Nathan here killed him, he didn't just kill his brother. He killed the man who could have tied 2 powerful families together across the divide." Nathan's mind raced, trying to process this new information. Could it be true? Had Margaret hidden such a significant part of her identity? And if so, why would Thorn care after all these years? "Even if what you're saying is true," Nathan said carefully, "what does it matter now? The war ended 20 years ago." "Because, my dear Lieutenant, some wars never truly end." Thorn reached inside his coat, producing a folded document. "This is a letter written by Robert to Margaret, dated 1 week before Appomattox. In it, he details the location of the Beaumont family fortune, gold and jewels worth a small fortune even today, hidden from advancing Union troops. Eleanor's eyes widen. That's what this is about? Treasure hunting? Simplified but essentially correct. Thorne refolded the paper. Senator Harlow has been searching for the Beaumont fortune for years. It's what initially drew him to Margaret, her family connection. But she proved uncooperative, claimed ignorance. So when she died, Nathan continued, piecing it together, you saw an opportunity. Follow Eleanor, hoping she had information leading to the treasure. And then I discovered something even better. You, Lieutenant McCoy, Robert's brother, the man who might possess the final piece of the puzzle. Thorne gestured to the cabin. That pendant you've kept all these years? It's not just a lover's token. It's a key. Nathan's grip tightened on his rifle. You're delusional. Am I? Turn it over, Lieutenant. Look at the markings on the back. Not a rose, but a map. Coordinates to the Beaumont fortune. Thorne spread his hands. I've spent years tracking this down. Your brother was clever, hiding the location in plain sight, entrusting it to the two people he loved most. A piece for each of you. Nathan's thoughts whirled. He'd never examined the pendant closely, too painful a reminder of his failure. Could there really be more to it than a simple love token? Enough games, Thorne, Eleanor said firmly. What do you really want? Simple. The pendant. I've already secured the letter from Margaret's effects before you left Boston. Thorne's genial mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Give me the pendant, and you both walk away from this. Refuse, and well, he gestured to his armed companions. The senator need never know exactly how his daughter met her tragic end in the Wild West. Nathan felt Eleanor tense beside him. Their options were limited. Even if he could shoot straight, one rifle against four armed men meant certain death. And if we give you the pendant, Nathan asked, what then? Then I tell the senator his daughter perished despite my best efforts to save her. A tragic accident. Thorne shrugged. You, McCoy, can disappear into the frontier. With your share of the treasure, of course. I'm not unreasonable. And you expect us to believe you'll honor that agreement? Eleanor scoffed. Thorne smiled thinly. You have my word as a gentleman. The word of a blackmailer and kidnapper, Nathan retorted. The word of a businessman, Lieutenant. Thorne's patience was visibly wearing thin. My offer expires in 30 seconds. The pendant or your lives. Choose. Nathan glanced at Eleanor, a silent question in his eyes. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. Very well, Nathan said, lowering his rifle slightly. The pendant is inside. I'll get it. Both of you go, Thorne instructed. Jones, accompany them. One of Thorne's men dismounted, a burly figure with a weathered face and cold eyes. He followed Nathan and Eleanor into the cabin, hand resting on his holstered revolver. Inside, Nathan moved to the table where the wooden box still sat. Eleanor stood near the kitchen area, her posture tense but composed. As Nathan opened the box, he positioned himself to block Jones's view. It's here, he said, lifting the pendant by its chain. The silver disc caught the light, spinning slowly. Jones stepped forward, reaching for it. Hand it over. Of course. Nathan extended his hand, then deliberately fumbled, dropping the pendant to the floor. Damn it, sorry. As Jones bent to retrieve it, Eleanor moved with surprising speed, bringing a cast-iron skillet down on the back of his head with a sickening crack. The man crumpled to the floor, unconscious or worse. Nathan grabbed his rifle and Eleanor's arm, pulling her toward the back window. We need to move, now. What about the pendant? She whispered urgently. Nathan scooped it up from beside Jones's motionless form. Can't let them have it, real treasure or not. They slipped through the back window just as Thorne's voice called from outside. Jones, what's taking so long? Nathan led Eleanor toward the barn, keeping low and using the corral fence as cover. Behind them, shouts erupted as Thorne discovered his unconscious man and their escape. The horses! Nathan hissed, pulling open the barn door. Inside, Scout and Eleanor's mare nickered softly in their stalls. They worked quickly, saddling the horses as the sound of boots crunching on gravel grew closer. Nathan handed Eleanor the reins to her mount. Head north, follow the creek bed. It leads to a narrow pass through the hills. Sheriff Calloway has a line cabin about 5 miles beyond. You'll be safe there. Eleanor paused, one foot in the stirrup. You're not coming? Someone needs to slow them down. Nathan checked his rifle, steeling himself. I'll catch up. Nathan, she began, concern etched across her features. Go, he urged. Please. Their eyes met, a universe of unspoken words passing between them in that brief moment. Then Eleanor nodded, swinging up into the saddle. Don't you dare die, Nathan McCoy, she whispered fiercely. We still have promises to keep. Before he could respond, she guided her horse through the back door of the barn and galloped toward the distant hills, quickly disappearing among the tall grass and scattered pines. Nathan took a deep breath, positioning himself behind a stack of hay bales with a clear view of the main door. His hands trembled as he aimed the rifle, but he forced himself to focus. Not for me, he thought. For her. For Robert. For the truth. The barn door creaked open, sunlight spilling across the dirt floor. A shadow appeared in the doorway, not Thorne, but one of his men. McCoy, the man called. We just want the pendant. No need for bloodshed. Nathan remained silent, his finger hovering near the trigger. The trembling in his hands intensified as memories of Appomattox flashed through his mind. Robert's face, the blood, the final breath. The man took another step in time, revolver drawn. Last chance, McCoy. Nathan closed his eyes for the briefest moment, pictured Eleanor riding to safety, then opened them with newfound clarity. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report was deafening in the enclosed space. The man yelled in pain, clutching his shoulder as he stumbled backward out the door. He's in the barn, the wounded man shouted to his companions. Nathan moved quickly to a different position, knowing they'd focus fire on his previous location. Sure enough, bullets splintered the hay bales where he'd been seconds before. You're surrounded, McCoy, Thorne's voice called. Send out the pendant and the girl, and you might live to see another sunrise. The girl's gone, Thorne, Nathan shouted back, and you'll never find what you're looking for. A bullet whizzed past his ear, embedding itself in the wooden beam behind him. Nathan ducked, heart pounding. He counted the shots, waiting for a pause that would indicate someone reloading. When it came, he rose quickly, fired twice at the shadows moving outside, then darted to Scout's stall. The gelding was agitated but responded to Nathan's calming touch. In one fluid motion, Nathan mounted, guiding the horse toward the back door. Burn it down, he heard Thorne command. Smoke him out. The acrid smell of kerosene reached his nostrils, followed by the whoosh of flames catching dry wood. Nathan urged Scout forward, bursting through the back door as fire began to lick up the side of the barn. Gunfire erupted behind him as he galloped away from the burning structure, bullets kicking up dirt around Scout's hooves. Nathan rode low over the horse's neck, making himself as small a target as possible. The creek bed Eleanor had followed lay just ahead. If he could reach it, the high banks would provide cover from the gunman. A sharp pain exploded in his left shoulder, the impact nearly unseating him. Nathan gritted his teeth, maintaining his grip on the reins with his good arm. The wound burned like fire, blood quickly soaking his shirt. Scout leaped down into the creek bed, hooves splashing in the shallow water. Nathan guided him upstream, away from the direction Eleanor had taken. He would lead Thorne and his men away from her, give her time to reach safety. Behind him, he could hear hoofbeats and shouting as his pursuers organized their chase. His vision swam, darkness creeping at the edges from blood loss and pain. Just a little farther, boy, he murmured to Scout, patting the horse's straining neck. The creek bed curved sharply to the right, leading toward a dense stand of cottonwoods. Nathan guided Scout into the trees, the dappled shadows providing momentary concealment. Dismounting painfully, he led the horse deeper into the thicket, then removed his bandana, tying it tightly around his wounded shoulder. The bullet had gone through cleanly, but the bleeding showed no signs of stopping. Nathan leaned against a tree, breathing heavily. The pendant hung from his clenched fist, the silver disc now smeared with his blood. For the first time, he turned it over, examining the back carefully. Thorne hadn't been lying, at least not about this. What Nathan had always assumed was a decorative pattern on the reverse of the pendant did indeed resemble a crude map, with tiny markings that could be coordinates. What were you mixed up in, Robert? He whispered, closing his fist around the pendant once more. The sound of approaching riders snapped him back to the present. They were following his trail, and in his condition, he couldn't outrun them much longer. Nathan made a quick decision. He removed his blood-stained shirt, tying it to a low branch where it would be visible from horseback. Then he led Scout deeper into the woods, away from the creek, moving as quietly as his injury allowed. If his plan worked, Thorne and his men would find the shirt, assume he had continued along the creek bed, and miss his actual trail into the forest. It wasn't much of a diversion, but it might buy him the time he needed. As the sounds of pursuit grew louder, Nathan whispered a final command to Scout, urging the loyal horse away from him. If captured, he didn't want his mount abused by Thorne's men. Alone now, bleeding and weakened, Nathan McCoy pressed the silver pendant to his lips. "I'll keep my promise this time, brother," he vowed softly, "whatever it takes." Eleanor rode hard until the horse beneath her began to labor, its sides heaving with exertion. Only then did she slow to a walk, constantly glancing over her shoulder for signs of pursuit. The narrow pass Nathan had described appeared ahead, a cleft between two rocky hills, barely wide enough for a horse to navigate. She guided her mare through carefully, the animal's hooves clattering on loose stone. Beyond the pass, the landscape opened into a small, hidden valley, lush with summer grass and dotted with wildflowers. A small cabin stood at the far end, smoke rising lazily from its stone chimney. Sheriff Calloway's line cabin. Safety, at least temporarily. Eleanor approached cautiously, relief washing through her when the door opened to reveal the sheriff himself, rifle in hand. "Miss Harlow?" Calloway called, lowering his weapon as he recognized her. "What in blazes are you doing out here alone?" She dismounted quickly, leading her exhausted horse toward him. "Thorne," she explained breathlessly. "He came back with men. Nathan stayed behind to hold them off." Calloway's weathered face darkened. "How many?" "4, including Thorne. We managed to incapacitate one in the cabin." The sheriff ushered her inside, taking the reins of her horse. "I'll put your mare in the corral out back. Then you're going to tell me exactly what happened." Minutes later, seated at Calloway's rough-hewn table with a cup of strong coffee before her, Eleanor related everything. The letters, the pendant, Thorne's claims about a hidden Beaumont fortune. "So that's what this is about," Calloway mused when she finished. "Treasure hunting." "Do you think it's true?" Eleanor asked. "About the Beaumont fortune?" The sheriff considered this. There were rumors after the war, wealthy Southern families hiding their valuables from advancing Union troops. Some of those caches have never been found. He shook his head. But to chase it this long, this hard, Thorne must be mighty convinced it's real. "What about my father?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Could he really be involved in this?" Calloway's expression softened. "Politics makes strange bedfellows, Miss Harlow. I can't speak to your daddy's dealings, but men of power often walk shadowed paths to maintain that power." Eleanor stared into her coffee, the dark liquid reflecting her troubled expression. "We have to help Nathan." "We will," Calloway assured her, "but charging back and half-cocked will only get us all killed." He stood, moving to a wooden chest in the corner. "First light tomorrow, we ride for town. I've got deputies there, good men. We'll form a proper posse." "Tomorrow might be too late," Eleanor protested. "Thorne won't kill McCoy," Calloway said confidently. "Not if he believes Nathan knows something about that treasure. He'll keep him alive for questioning." The words offered little comfort. Eleanor had seen the cold calculation in Thorne's eyes, the casual cruelty in his manner. What methods would such a man employ to extract information? As night fell, Eleanor stood on the cabin's small porch, gazing toward the distant hills behind which lay Nathan's ranch. No glow of fire lit the horizon, no sound of gunfire carried on the evening breeze. Only silence. She clutched the silver pendant Nathan had pressed into her hand just before they separated, a silent acknowledgement that she was now the keeper of both their fates. Turning it over, she studied the markings on its reverse side, trying to make sense of what appeared to be a crude map. "Where are you, Nathan?" she whispered to the darkening sky. "And what secrets did your brother take to his grave?" Inside the cabin, Sheriff Calloway loaded his revolvers and rifle, preparing for whatever morning might bring. Outside, as the first stars appeared, Eleanor made a silent promise to the ghosts that had brought her to this place. To Margaret, to Robert, and to the man who now risked everything to protect her. This time, promises would be kept. This time, the truth would finally come to light, no matter the cost. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Wyoming hills. Eleanor stood on the porch of Sheriff Calloway's cabin, her breath forming small clouds in the morning air. She hadn't slept more than an hour or two, her mind consumed with thoughts of Nathan, wounded, perhaps captured, possibly worse. The silver pendant hung from a leather cord around her neck, its weight a constant reminder of the promises that bound them all. She'd studied its markings by lamplight for hours, the tiny etched lines that formed what indeed appeared to be a crude map. But without context, without some key to decipher it, the pendant's secret remained as hidden as the treasure it allegedly led to. Behind her, the cabin door creaked open as Sheriff Calloway emerged, two steaming cups of coffee in hand. He offered one to Eleanor, who accepted it gratefully. "Sun's up," he said simply. "Time to ride." Eleanor nodded, taking a sip of the bitter brew. "How long to town?" "2 hours at a good pace. My deputies will be ready." Calloway studied her face, the concern evident in his weathered features. "You didn't sleep." It wasn't a question. Eleanor didn't deny it. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nathan, bleeding alone." The sheriff's expression softened. "McCoy's tough. 20 years out here makes a man hard to kill." "It's not just that," Eleanor confessed, staring into her coffee. "It's knowing that all of this, Nathan's suffering, my mother's lifetime of secrecy, even Robert's death, it might all be because of treasure, because of greed." Calloway leaned against the porch railing. "Men have killed for less, Miss Harlow. Gold just gives them an excuse to do what's already in their nature." "And what's in Thorne's nature, do you think?" The sheriff's face darkened. "Calculation, cold-bloodedness. Men like that see people as tools or obstacles, nothing more." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the warm cup. "And my father? What kind of man employs someone like Thorne?" Calloway chose his words carefully. "Politics is a snake pit, Miss Harlow. Even good men sometimes reach for bad weapons when surrounded by enemies." "You're being diplomatic, Sheriff." "Not my place to judge a man I've never met." He straightened. "But I'll tell you this, how your father handles what's coming will tell you everything you need to know about him." Eleanor nodded, appreciating his honesty. She finished her coffee and handed the empty cup back to him. "Then let's not keep him waiting." Within 30 minutes, they were mounted and riding toward town, following a narrow trail that wound through pine-covered hills. Eleanor rode in silence, her thoughts a tangled knot of worry, grief, and determination. The pendant rested against her chest, a constant reminder of what was at stake. As they crested a rise, Calloway suddenly raised his hand, signaling her to stop. He dismounted, moving to the edge of the trail where it overlooked the valley below. "Riders," he said quietly, pointing toward a distant cloud of dust. "Coming from the east, moving fast." Eleanor joined him at the overlook. Even from this distance, the procession was impressive, at least a dozen mounted men accompanying several wagons, all moving with the purposeful efficiency of people accustomed to command. "My father," she said, her voice a mixture of certainty and apprehension. "That's his traveling style. Multiple wagons, armed escorts." Calloway frowned. "Heading straight for McCoy's ranch. How would they know to go there?" A cold realization washed over Eleanor. "Thorne, he must have intercepted my father's party, told them where to find me. Which means they might be riding into a trap." The sheriff turned back to his horse. "We need to move, fast." They urged their mounts to a gallop, taking a more direct route down the ridge toward Nathan's ranch. Eleanor's heart pounded in time with her horse's hooves, fear and urgency driving her forward. If Thorne was using her father to draw them out, there would be bloodshed, and Nathan, already wounded, would be caught in the middle. As they rode, the first gunshot echoed across the valley, followed quickly by several more. They were already too late. Nathan McCoy had survived the night through sheer stubborn will. The wound in his shoulder burned like fire, and blood loss had left him lightheaded and weak. But he'd managed to evade Thorne's men in the dense woods. He'd found a small cave formed by an overhanging rock, concealed by thick undergrowth. Not comfortable, but hidden from casual search. From this vantage point, he'd watched Thorne's men ride past several times during the night, their torches casting eerie shadows through the trees. They'd found his bloodied shirt by the creek, as he'd intended, and focused their search in the wrong direction. By dawn, the sounds of pursuit had faded. Either they'd given up, or more likely were regrouping at his ranch. Nathan knew he should remain hidden, But the thought of Eleanor's father arriving to find Thorn in possession of the property and potentially spinning whatever tale served his purposes propelled him back toward his home. Moving slowly through the underbrush, pausing frequently to catch his breath, Nathan made his way back toward the ranch. His wound had stopped bleeding, but the pain remained intense, and fever had begun to set in. He needed medical attention soon, or infection would accomplish what Thorn's bullet had failed to do. The sight that greeted him as he neared the edge of the woods stopped him cold. His barn was a blackened skeleton, still smoldering from the fire Thorn had set. The cabin appeared intact, but men patrolled its perimeter, not Thorn's rough crew, but uniformed guards with military precision to their movements. And in the yard stood an imposing figure Nathan instantly recognized from newspaper illustrations. Senator Harrison Harlow himself. Tall and distinguished despite the dust of travel, his silver-streaked hair and immaculate suit marked him as a man of wealth and influence, even in these remote surroundings. Two younger men flanked him, likely aides or secretaries, while several armed guards maintained a perimeter. Of Thorn, there was no sign. Nathan crouched lower in the brush, his mind racing despite the fever clouding his thoughts. Had Eleanor's father arrived earlier than expected? Where was Thorn? And most importantly, where was Eleanor? The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew his attention. Through the trees, Nathan glimpsed riders approaching from the north. Sheriff Calloway, and beside him, Eleanor herself. Relief flooded through him at the sight of her, safe and unharmed. As they rode into the yard, Harrison Harlow turned sharply, his posture stiffening. Even from this distance, Nathan could see the mixture of emotions that crossed the senator's face at the sight of his daughter. Relief, confusion, and something that might have been anger. "Eleanor," Harlow's voice carried clearly in the morning air. "Thank God you're safe." Eleanor dismounted, approaching her father with cautious dignity. "Hello, Father. When your telegram arrived saying you were in Wyoming, of all places," the senator shook his head in disbelief. "And then to receive word that you'd been abducted? What were you thinking coming out here alone?" "I wasn't alone," Eleanor replied evenly. "I was fulfilling Mother's final wish." The mention of Margaret brought a visible change to Harlow's demeanor. His shoulders tensed, his expression hardening. "Margaret had no business sending you on such a dangerous errand." "She had every right," Eleanor countered. "It was important to her, and now I understand why." The senator's eyes narrowed. "What exactly do you understand, Eleanor?" Before she could answer, Sheriff Calloway intervened. "Senator Harlow, I'm Sheriff Thomas Calloway. Your daughter is safe now, but there's a dangerous situation here you should be aware of. A man named Adrian Thorn—" "I'm well acquainted with Mr. Thorn," Harlow interrupted coolly. "He intercepted our party early this morning with the information about Eleanor's whereabouts. I sent him ahead to secure the area." Nathan's blood ran cold. So Thorn had reached the senator first, had time to tell whatever version of events suited his purpose. "Sir," Calloway persisted, "Thorn is wanted for kidnapping and attempted murder. He's the one who abducted your daughter." Harlow's eyebrows rose. "That's absurd. Thorn has been in my employ for years. He's a trusted investigator." "He's a criminal," Eleanor said firmly. "He kidnapped me, left me to die in the desert, and has been hunting a man named Nathan McCoy, the man Mother sent me to find." At the mention of Nathan's name, a strange expression crossed Harlow's face. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. "And where is this Mr. McCoy now?" Nathan tensed, knowing the moment had come to reveal himself. But before he could move, a new voice entered the conversation. "Right here, Senator." Adrian Thorn emerged from behind the cabin, a revolver held casually at his side. Two of his men flanked him, their weapons drawn. The left side of Thorn's face was scratched and bruised, evidence of his rough escape through the forest. "Mr. Thorn," Harlow acknowledged with a nod, "I take it you've located McCoy." "Not yet, Senator." Thorn's eyes scanned the tree line, and Nathan instinctively pressed himself lower to the ground. "But he can't have gone far, not with a bullet in him." Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "You shot him?" "He resisted arrest," Thorn replied smoothly, "after attempting to extort money from your father with fabricated tales about your mother's past." "That's a lie!" Eleanor's voice rang with fury. "Nathan saved my life after your men left me to die." Harlow looked between them, confusion evident in his expression. "What is going on here?" "Thorn, you told me Eleanor had been kidnapped by local outlaws, and that this McCoy fellow was harboring her for ransom. Thorne's smile never wavered. A necessary simplification, Senator. The truth is more complicated. Nathan had heard enough. Despite his wounded state, he couldn't allow this charade to continue. Gathering what strength remained, he rose from his hiding place and stepped into the open, rifle held awkwardly in his good hand. "The truth, Senator Harlow," he called, his voice steady despite his weakness, "is that your wife loved my brother Robert. And Thorne has been using that secret to manipulate you for years." All eyes turned toward him. Eleanor's face lit with relief and concern, the senator's with shock and suspicion, Thorne's with cold fury. "Nathan!" Eleanor started toward him, but one of Thorne's men blocked her path. "Stay where you are, Miss Harlow," Thorne commanded, his weapon now trained on Nathan. "This man is dangerous." Nathan continued forward, each step an effort as he fought against pain and blood loss. "The only danger here is the truth, isn't it, Thorne? The truth about Margaret Beaumont, about the hidden fortune, about the pendant." Harlow's expression changed at the mention of Beaumont, a flash of recognition that confirmed at least part of Thorne's claims. "How do you know that name?" he demanded. "Because my brother Robert was in love with her during the war. Because she asked Eleanor to find me after her death. Because all of this," Nathan gestured to encompass the ranch, the armed men, all of it, "is about a treasure that may not even exist." Thorne's laugh was cold and humorless. "Oh, it exists, Lieutenant, and you know exactly where it is." "I don't," Nathan replied honestly. "I never looked at the pendant closely until yesterday. I never read my brother's letter until Eleanor arrived." "A convenient story," Thorne sneered. "Senator, this man has been sitting on the key to the Beaumont fortune for 20 years. The pendant his brother gave to Margaret, your wife, contains a map. Combined with the letter I recovered from her belongings, it leads to gold worth millions." Harlow's gaze sharpened. "Is this true, McCoy?" Nathan met the senator's eyes directly. "I don't know. What I do know is that your wife never stopped loving my brother, that she lived 20 years not knowing what happened to him. Because I failed to deliver the news of his death, failed to return the pendant he intended for her." "And why was that?" Harlow's voice was dangerously quiet. Nathan's strength was fading, but he forced himself to stand tall, to face the truth he had avoided for 2 decades. "Because I killed him. At Appomattox, my own brother, in the confusion of battle. I couldn't face what I'd done, couldn't face Margaret. So I ran." A heavy silence fell over the yard. Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears, while Harlow's face had gone rigid with shock. Thorne broke the silence with a derisive laugh. "How touching. A confession 20 years too late. But it changes nothing, Senator. The Beaumont fortune is still out there, waiting to be claimed." "And that's all you care about, isn't it?" Eleanor challenged, stepping forward, despite the restraining arm of Thorne's man. "Not mother, not justice, just gold." "Gold is justice, my dear," Thorne replied coldly. "Gold is power, something your father understands very well." All eyes turned to Harlow, whose expression had become unreadable. For a long moment he stood in silence, weighing the revelations, measuring the man before him. "Where is this pendant now?" he asked finally. Nathan hesitated. Revealing that Eleanor had it would put her in danger. But before he could formulate a response, Eleanor herself stepped forward, pulling the silver disc from beneath her shirt. "I have it, Father," she said, her voice steady. "Nathan gave it to me for safekeeping." Thorne's eyes gleamed with triumph. "There. You see, Senator? Everything I told you was true. The key to the Beaumont fortune, within our grasp at last." Harlow extended his hand to Eleanor. "May I see it?" With a moment's hesitation, Eleanor removed the cord from around her neck and placed the pendant in her father's palm. Harlow examined it carefully, turning it over to study the markings on its reverse. "After all these years," he murmured. "Margaret never mentioned this." "She didn't know what it was," Eleanor explained. "To her, it was simply a token of Robert's love, a promise of their future together." The senator's expression transformed through a series of complex emotions: shock, pain, anger, and finally a resigned understanding. His shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of 20 years of living with a ghost suddenly made visible. "She never spoke of him," Harlow said, his voice rough with emotion. Not once in all our years together. Some nights I'd find her sitting alone, staring at nothing, and when I entered the room, she'd smile that careful smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. He opened his palm, staring at the pendant. I gave her jewels, diamonds, sapphires, the finest pieces money could buy, but this simple silver disc she kept hidden away was her true treasure. His jaw tightened. I built an empire for a woman whose heart belonged to a dead Confederate soldier. A bitter laugh escaped him, quickly controlled. 20 years of marriage, raising a child together, building a life. And still, there were chambers in her heart I could never enter. For a moment, the yard was silent, save for the soft whispering of the wind through the grass. Then Thorne stepped forward, his hand outstretched, interrupting the raw moment with calculated precision. A touching sentiment, Senator. But we have business to conclude. The pendant, if you please. Harlow looked up at Thorne, his expression hardening as clarity dawned. You knew all along, didn't you? About Margaret, about this McCoy fellow. You've been searching for the Beaumont fortune on my payroll while I was searching for my wife's heart. I serve many masters, Senator, Thorne replied smoothly. Sometimes their interests align, sometimes they conflict. Business, nothing more. And kidnapping my daughter? Yeah, Palmer? Was that business too? Thorne's smile never wavered. A necessary step to flush out McCoy and the pendant. No lasting harm was intended. You left me tied in the desert to die, Eleanor said coldly. A calculated risk. I knew someone would find you eventually. Thorne's patience was visibly wearing thin. Now, Senator, the pendant. We had an agreement. Harlow's expression hardened. Our agreement was for you to find Eleanor, not endanger her life. Details, Thorne dismissed with a wave of his hand. The result is the same. We have the girl, we have the pendant. We're one step closer to the fortune your father-in-law hid from the Union Army, a fortune that, by rights, should be yours. Nathan, who had been silently observing this exchange, steadying himself against a fence post as his strength continued to fade, spoke up. Is that what all this is about, Senator? Claiming Margaret's inheritance? Harlow turned to him, his expression complex. Margaret's family lost everything in the war. Land, slaves, position. When I married her, she had nothing. Colonel Beaumont was already dead, his plantation burned. There were rumors he'd hidden the family wealth, but Margaret claimed to know nothing about it. And you believed her? Eleanor asked softly. A shadow passed across Harlow's face. I wanted to, but there were letters, references to a safeguard the colonel had arranged. After Margaret died, I found correspondence suggesting she knew more than she'd admitted. So you sent Thorne to investigate, Nathan concluded, and he found his way to me. Not immediately, Thorne interjected. First, I tracked down every surviving member of the Beaumont household. Former slaves, neighbors, distant relatives. None knew where the colonel had hidden his gold, but several mentioned a Union soldier Margaret had been seen with near the end of the war. Robert, Eleanor breathed. Precisely. A Confederate colonel entrusting the location of his fortune to a Union soldier seems unlikely, unless that soldier was involved with his daughter. From there, it was simply a matter of tracing Robert McCoy's history to his brother Nathan. Thorne's smile turned cruel. And imagine my surprise when I discovered that the brother had killed him at Appomattox. Poetic, really. Nathan's legs nearly buckled at the casual cruelty of Thorne's words. Only Eleanor's steadying hand, suddenly at his side, kept him upright. You need a doctor, she whispered urgently. Not yet, Nathan murmured back. Not until this is finished. Thorne's attention remained fixed on the senator. The pendant, sir. Time is wasting. For a long moment, Harlow stood motionless, the silver disc clutched in his fist. Then, with deliberate slowness, he turned to face Thorne directly. No. The single word seemed to hang in the air. Thorne's smile faltered. Senator? I said no, Mr. Thorne. Whatever is written on this pendant, whatever fortune it might lead to, it's not mine to claim. It was Margaret's, and now it's Eleanor's. Harlow stepped back, placing himself between Thorne and his daughter. Your services are no longer required. Thorne's face twisted with rage. You fool! Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for this? 20 years of my life hunting down every lead, every whisper about the Beaumont gold. I won't be dismissed now, not when we're so close. In one swift motion, he raised his revolver, aiming it directly at Harlow. The pendant, now! Sheriff Calloway had his own weapon drawn in an instant. Lower your gun, Thorne. You're already wanted for kidnapping. Don't add murder to the charges. Thorne laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Murder! Sheriff, look around you. I have men positioned throughout this property. One word from me and none of you leave this ranch alive. His cold gaze swept over them all. Now the pendant. Final warning. Nathan felt time slow, the moment crystallizing with terrible clarity. Thorne's finger was tightening on the trigger. Harlow, for all his power and influence, stood unprotected. Sheriff Calloway was too far away to intervene in time. And Eleanor, brave, determined Eleanor, was moving to stand beside her father, defiance in every line of her body. 20 years of running from his greatest failure. 20 years of trembling hands and cowardice disguised as solitude. But something had changed in these past days with Eleanor. Each morning before she woke, he'd been practicing, forcing himself to hold the revolver steady, to remember the discipline that once made him one of the best marksmen in his unit. Those quiet dawn sessions, alone with his demons, had been a private battle, his trembling fingers struggling against the weight of memory. At first, he couldn't hold steady for more than a few seconds. But gradually, as Eleanor's presence in his life began to heal old wounds, those moments of steadiness lengthened. Now, in this crucial moment, Nathan found what he'd been seeking in those solitary practice sessions. The faces of those he needed to protect, Eleanor, her father, even the memory of Robert and Margaret, crystallized his purpose, burning away 20 years of self-doubt. Nathan raised his rifle in one fluid motion, ignoring the tearing pain in his wounded shoulder. His hands, finding the muscle memory of the soldier he once was, were perfectly steady. He squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the yard, startling birds from nearby trees. Thorne staggered backward, a look of genuine surprise crossing his features as he looked down at the blossoming red stain on his chest. His revolver slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers. You, he managed, staring at Nathan with disbelief. You couldn't shoot straight. Some things, Nathan replied quietly, are worth overcoming your fears for. Thorne sank to his knees, then toppled forward into the dust. Around the yard, his men hesitated, caught between loyalty to their fallen leader and self-preservation. Drop your weapons, Calloway commanded, his revolver now trained on the nearest of Thorne's gang. It's over. One by one, the men complied, their guns thudding to the ground. The senator's guards moved swiftly to secure them, while Calloway knelt beside Thorne, checking for signs of life. After a moment, he rose, shaking his head. Dead, he pronounced simply. Nathan lowered his rifle, a curious sense of peace washing over him. He'd taken a life, something he had sworn never to do again after Robert. And yet, this time, there was no guilt, no self-loathing, only the certainty that he'd acted to protect those who needed protection. Eleanor was suddenly at his side, supporting him as his strength finally gave out. You need a doctor, she insisted. This time, Nathan didn't protest as she helped him toward the cabin. Behind them, Senator Harlow issued crisp commands to his men, organizing the custody of Thorne's gang, with the efficiency of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Inside the cabin, Eleanor eased Nathan onto his bed, then set about cleaning and rebandaging his wound. Her touch was gentle but sure, her face a study in concentration as she worked. You saved my father's life, she said quietly. Nathan's eyes were growing heavy, exhaustion and blood loss finally taking their toll. Couldn't let another man die because of my cowardice. Eleanor's hand stilled. Is that what you think? That Robert died because you were a coward? I should have recognized him, Nathan murmured, the edges of consciousness beginning to blur. Should have seen my own brother, even through the smoke. It was war, Nathan, confusion, chaos. You didn't choose to kill him. Her voice seemed to come from very far away. And today, you chose to save lives. Remember that. As darkness claimed him, Nathan felt her hand against his cheek, cool and comforting. His last conscious thought was that, for the first time in 20 years, he might actually sleep without nightmares. Eleanor kept vigil beside Nathan's bed as the town doctor, summoned by Sheriff Calloway, examined the wound. The bullet had passed clean through his shoulder, a fortunate circumstance that likely saved his life. With proper care, he would recover fully. As the doctor worked, Senator Harlow entered the cabin. He stood awkwardly in the doorway for a moment, looking oddly out of place in his fine Eastern suit among the simple frontier furnishings. "How is he?" he asked quietly. "He'll live," Eleanor replied, not taking her eyes from Nathan's unconscious form. "No thanks to Thorne." Harlow approached slowly, coming to stand beside her. "I've been blind, Eleanor, blind to many things." She looked up at him, studying the face she'd known all her life. For the first time, she saw not just the powerful senator, but a man, flawed, fallible, capable of both strength and weakness. "Did you love her?" she asked. "Mother?" A complicated expression crossed Harlow's features. "In my way, yes. Not as she deserved, perhaps. Not as—" He hesitated. "Not as this McCoy boy's brother might have." "Robert," Eleanor supplied. "His name was Robert." "Robert," Harlow echoed, the name sounding foreign on his lips. "The man whose memory I competed with for 20 years without even knowing it." He sighed deeply. "Had I known, perhaps I would have been kinder, less demanding of her perfect loyalty." Eleanor reached out, taking her father's hand in hers. "She chose you, Father. Whatever her reasons, she built a life with you, gave you everything she could." "Except her heart," he said softly. Then, seeing the pain in Eleanor's expression, he squeezed her hand. "But she gave me you, and that has been the greatest treasure of my life." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. For all his faults, all his ambition and control, Harrison Harlow did love his daughter. It wasn't a perfect love, but it was real. "What will you do about the pendant?" she asked. "About the Beaumont fortune? If it exists." Harlow reached into his pocket, withdrawing the silver disc. He studied it briefly, then placed it on the small table beside Nathan's bed. "It belongs to McCoy," he said decisively. "Whatever secrets it holds, whatever fortune it might lead to, it's his by right. His brother entrusted it to Margaret, and Margaret entrusted finding him to you. And if there really is gold, millions, as Thorne claimed?" A wry smile touched Harlow's lips. "My dear, I'm a United States Senator with investments in railroads, banks, and manufacturing. I've amassed more wealth than Colonel Beaumont ever dreamed of. I don't need gold buried in some forgotten corner of Virginia." Eleanor searched his face, finding only truth there. "Thank you," she said simply. Harlow nodded, then glanced toward the door. "I must return to Washington soon. The session resumes next week, and there are matters requiring my attention." He hesitated. "Will you come with me?" The question hung in the air between them. Eleanor looked at Nathan, still unconscious but breathing steadily now, his face peaceful in sleep. Then back to her father, who waited patiently for her answer. "Not yet," she said finally. "There are our promises still to be kept. Margaret's final wish fulfilled, yes, but there's more to be done here." Understanding dawned in Harlow's eyes as he followed her gaze to Nathan. "I see." A pause. "He seems a good man, beneath the rough exterior." "He is," Eleanor confirmed. "Wounded like all of us, but good." Harlow straightened his shoulders, the senator once more. "Very well, I shall leave tomorrow. When you're ready to return east, send a telegram. My house remains your home, Eleanor, whatever you decide." "Thank you, Father." After he'd gone, Eleanor resumed her vigil beside Nathan's bed. Outside, the sounds of activity continued as the senator's men secured Thorne's gang for transport to the territorial jail, and Sheriff Calloway organized the grim business of dealing with Thorne's body. Eleanor's fingers found the silver pendant on the bedside table. She lifted it, studying the markings on its reverse side. A crude map, yes, but of what? Without some reference point, some key to its meaning, it remained as mysterious as ever. Perhaps that was fitting. Some secrets deserve to remain buried, their power diminished by time and perspective. The Beaumont fortune, if it existed, had already cost too much. Decades of Margaret's quiet sorrow, Robert's life, Nathan's torment, and now Thorne's obsession ended in blood. Enough, Eleanor decided. Whatever ghost had driven them all to this moment, it was time they were laid to rest. 3 days passed before Nathan regained enough strength to sit up and take solid food. Eleanor remained at his side, tending his wounds, ensuring he rested. Senator Harlow had departed for Washington as promised, leaving behind two of his men at Eleanor's request, not as guards, but as helpers to repair the damage Thorne's attack had caused. Sheriff Calloway visited daily, bringing news from town. Thorne's men had been transported to the territorial capital for trial, their confessions securing charges of kidnapping, attempted murder, and conspiracy against each of them. On the fourth morning, Nathan awoke to find Eleanor sitting beside his bed, a tray of breakfast in her hands and determination in her expression. "We're going riding today," she announced without preamble. Nathan blinked, still foggy with sleep. "Riding? Eleanor, I can barely stand." "A short ride," she amended. "There's somewhere we need to go." Her tone brooked no argument. After breakfast, she helped him dress, supporting him as they made their way to the barn, or rather to the makeshift shelter that had been erected in its place. Inside, Scout nickered a greeting, seemingly no worse for his adventures during Thorne's attack. With Eleanor's assistance, Nathan managed to mount, though the effort left him lightheaded and sweating. Eleanor swung up onto her own mare, then led the way from the yard, setting a gentle pace that wouldn't tax Nathan's weakened condition. They rode in companionable silence through the morning, following a game trail that wound into the hills east of the ranch. The day was perfect. Clear blue sky, the air sweet with the scent of pine and sage, a cool breeze tempering the summer heat. Eventually, they reached a small clearing atop a ridge that overlooked the valley below. Nathan could see his ranch in the distance, the skeletal remains of his barn, the silver ribbon of the creek winding through the grassland. Eleanor dismounted, then helped Nathan down from Scout. She spread a blanket beneath the shade of a towering pine and insisted he sit. From her saddlebag, she produced a small package wrapped in oilcloth. "I found this among my mother's belongings," she explained, sitting beside him. "After she died, but before I left Boston. I didn't understand its significance then." She unwrapped the cloth to reveal a small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Opening it carefully, she began to read aloud. April 9th, 1865. Today the war ended. General Lee surrendered to General Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. The patients cheered when they heard the news, even those who wore gray. "They're so tired, so ready for peace. But my heart knows no peace today. Robert has been missing for 3 days now. I search every face that comes through our field hospital, pray with every breath that he will return to me. He promised. He gave me his pendant as a token of that promise. Swore he would find me when the fighting ended." Eleanor turned the page, her voice softening. April 12th, 1865. A Union lieutenant came to the hospital today. I knew immediately he was Robert's brother. They have the same eyes. He told me Robert died at Appomattox, caught in the confusion of the final skirmishes. The lieutenant himself found him, held him as he died. Robert's last words, he said, were of me. I should feel gratitude for this knowledge, for the certainty it brings. Instead, I feel only emptiness. The lieutenant promised to return tomorrow with Robert's personal effects, but I cannot bear to see him again, to look into those eyes so like my beloved's. I will be gone by morning, back to my father's estate, or what remains of it. Nathan sat very still, absorbing the words. She did know, he whispered. All these years I thought I'd failed to tell her. Eleanor shook her head. You did tell her, Nathan. You found her at the field hospital, delivered the news of Robert's death, but you never returned the next day with his effects, with the pendant. I couldn't, Nathan admitted. After seeing her grief, knowing I was the cause, I couldn't face her again. So I rode away, carrying Robert's things with me. A coward's choice. A human choice, Eleanor corrected gently. You were wounded too, Nathan. Not in body, but in spirit. She turned several pages in the journal, finding another entry. June 1865. Father is dead, the plantation burned, our fortunes seemingly lost with him. The colonel, always so proud, so certain of his place in the world, left me nothing but ashes and memories. And yet, there is hope. Harrison Harlow, a northern businessman with political ambitions, has asked for my hand. He offers security, position, a new beginning far from Virginia and its ghosts. I do not love him. My heart lies buried in an unmarked grave at Appomattox. But perhaps with time, I can give him enough of myself to build a life worth living. Eleanor closed the journal softly. She never forgot Robert, but she found a way to live, to move forward. And in her final days, she found the courage to reach back across time, to connect the broken threads. Nathan stared out across the valley, his vision blurring with unshed tears. All these years wasted, running from a guilt that was never fully mine to bear. Not wasted, Eleanor said firmly. You built something here, Nathan. A life of integrity, of quiet strength. Would you have chosen this path without the burden you carried? Would you have found this peace? She gestured to the vista spread before them. He considered this, seeing his life through new eyes, the solitude that had been both punishment and refuge. The land he'd tamed and cherished, the respect he'd earned from men like Sheriff Calloway. Not the life he might have imagined as a young lieutenant, but a life of meaning nonetheless. And now, he asked quietly, what happens now, Eleanor? She reached into her pocket, withdrawing the silver pendant. The sun caught its surface, sending a flash of light across their faces. First, we decide what to do about this. About the Beaumont fortune, if it exists. Nathan took the pendant, turning it over to study the markings on its reverse. For the first time, he noticed tiny letters etched along the edge, so small they might easily be mistaken for decorative flourishes. Squinting, he made out a sequence. VB 38.03N 78.47W. Coordinates, he realized aloud. Virginia most likely, near Charlottesville if I remember the maps correctly. Eleanor leaned closer, her shoulder brushing his as she examined the tiny markings. So there really is a map. Thorne wasn't entirely lying. It seems not. Nathan handed the pendant back to her. The question is, what do we do with this knowledge? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. Nothing, she said finally. Or rather, nothing yet. The gold has remained hidden for 20 years. It can stay buried a while longer. Nathan raised an eyebrow. You're not curious? It could be a fortune beyond imagining. I've seen what the promise of gold does to people, she replied, her eyes finding his. I'm in no hurry to test whether we're any stronger than Thorne was against its allure. A smile touched Nathan's lips, the first genuine smile in longer than he could remember. Wise beyond your years, Eleanor Harlow. Well, I've had exceptional teachers recently, she returned, smiling back. In courage, in integrity, in keeping promises, no matter how delayed. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken possibilities. Nathan became acutely aware of her closeness, of the warmth of her shoulder against his, of the way the sunlight caught in her hair. Speaking of promises, he said, his voice rougher than he intended. What will you do now? Return to Boston? Your father's waiting. Eleanor's gaze remained steady. My father will always be waiting, Nathan. His world moves at a different pace than ours. Politics, ambition, society, they're constant demands that never diminish. She paused. But here, there's time. Time to heal. Time to build. Time to discover what might grow in soil no longer poisoned by secrets and guilt. The implication of her words hung between them, fragile and precious as a bird newly hatched. Nathan scarcely dared breathe, afraid to shatter the moment with presumption or misunderstanding. Eleanor, he began carefully, I'm 20 years your senior, a broken-down rancher with nothing to offer but a half-burned barn and too many bad memories. Are they still bad? She challenged softly. Those memories, or have they transformed into something else now? Something that reminds you of resilience rather than failure? Nathan considered this, the weight of 20 years of self-recrimination balanced against the strange peace he'd found these past days. The steady hands that had held the rifle to save Harlow's life. The knowledge that Margaret had known of Robert's fate after all. I don't know what I feel anymore, he admitted. Everything I believed about myself, about my past, it's all shifting beneath my feet. Eleanor's hand found his, her fingers twining with his own. Then perhaps it's time to build on new foundations. Together, if you'll have me. Nathan looked down at their joined hands, then up to meet her gaze. In her eyes, he saw not pity or blind infatuation, but clear-sighted understanding and genuine affection. She'd seen him at his weakest and his strongest, had witnessed his failures and his redemption. And still, she chose to stay. It won't be easy, he warned. Your father, society, The differences between us, nothing worth having comes easily, she interrupted. Margaret and Robert taught us that, if nothing else. She squeezed his hand gently. I'm not asking for promises of forever, Nathan. Only the chance to discover what might be possible, now that the ghosts between us have found their rest. For a moment, he could only stare at her, overwhelmed by the gift she offered. Not just her presence, but the possibility of a future unbound by the chains of the past. Then, with a tentative gentleness that belied his weathered exterior, Nathan reached out to touch her cheek. Then stay, he said simply. Stay and we'll build something new together. Eleanor's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. She leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that tasted of promise and renewal, of endings and beginnings inextricably intertwined. When they parted, Nathan felt lighter than he had in 20 years, as though some essential burden had finally been lifted from his shoulders. The ghosts that had haunted him, Robert, Margaret, his own younger self, seemed to fade into the background, not vanishing entirely but receding to their proper place in the tapestry of memory. They remained in the clearing until late afternoon, talking of small things and large, of practical matters like barn raising and cattle breeding, of abstract concepts like forgiveness and second chances. And beneath it all ran the current of something new taking root, not the desperate passion of youth, but the steadier, deeper connection of two souls who had weathered separate storms and found unexpected harbor in each other. As the sun began its descent toward the western hills, they mounted their horses for the journey home. Eleanor wore the pendant again, its silver disc catching the golden light as they rode. The map it contained, the treasure it might lead to, those were questions for another day, another season. For now, it was enough to ride side by side through the lengthening shadows, toward the small cabin that waited below, toward a future neither of them could have imagined when the day began. The secrets that had lain hidden for so long beneath the sunset of their separate sorrows had finally emerged into the light, and in that light they had found not the bitter reckoning they feared, but the sweet possibility of redemption, together.